everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Wisdom Within. I am joined by the wonderful Johnny, who I met playing paddle tennis a few weeks back. And he is a mental fitness coach, and I was very inspired by the work he does. And I really wanted to have him on today to share his story because I know it will inspire a lot of people. So, Johnny, if you want to just start by introducing yourself, sharing your story to becoming a mental fitness coach.
I didn't actually realize sort of wisdom within was your moniker. It's very much part of what drew me to coaching.
Mm,
The belief that, you know, every single human being has resourcefulness, that they have the ability to fix their own problems. They're
mm,
naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, if you like, is a belief. So we're in the right place.
yeah.
But to sort of go back and answer your question, yeah, God, how did I get here? I guess I started off I thought I was going to be a pilot. So I did my training at university and thought I was going to join the Air Force and kind of fly jets and be cool. And that all ended during a medical. I was told I was too tall to fly.
Mm,
And that was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it taught me that lesson that you might think you're going in one direction, but
yeah.
it can change and they can change quickly. And I ended up in finance, which a lot of people, well, a lot of my contemporaries back in the sort of mid '80s, jumped into because it was cool and well paid and glamorous, and it was all of those things. But in my case, I don't think it was necessarily thoroughly thought through. Thought through. It was what I did, and I had a magical 20 years. Um,
Mm,
I was in New York, got properly trained. Then I ended up in, yeah, I was covering Latin America. I don't really want to dwell on that. Let's just say I was in finance. I was incredibly well paid, overly well paid, if you like, and that in many ways gave me the opportunity to say, thank you, enough. And I'd somewhat pledged to myself, rather naively, this idea that and if I was lucky enough to start a family, I would try not to be working for somebody else.
mm,
I would try not to be beholden to an employer and the rigors and realities of just what that meant. Um, so London, New York. I was in Moscow for 3 years. I had this job where I was 2 weeks in Moscow, one in London, one in New York. It was a treadmill, but fascinating. Um, but enough was enough. And my first child was born in 2003, and I went back to what I loved, which was flying. Went to Kenya, set up a charter company, lived in the Chulu Hills, and flew for about a year and a half. No, 2 years actually, until my wife quite rightly said, "Hold on a minute, I didn't sign up for living in the bush." Came back to London, went from the sales side. I worked at a firm called Salomon Brothers, and then I went to work with a friend of mine in the asset management business, so fund management. Got back into that world with a wonderful group of people, but as a consultant. So I was able to focus on, if you like, creating value for them, but without being sort of drawn into the day-to-day corporate grind.
mhm,
That is a huge privilege if you're able to do that. Um, Two more kids, and we were living this incredibly sort of privileged but rather dull life. We had a nice house in London. I'm feeling this energy coming up that I'm going to get shot at for saying what I'm going to say next, but I'm going to say it anyway. We had the house, the car, the cottage in the country. I mean, just an abundance of privilege and
mm,
good luck and goodwill and kids in the nice school. And I just felt, for me, it felt like there was something missing, that this wasn't real. This wasn't life. This wasn't what I wanted for my kids. And an element of this wasn't what I wanted for myself. So within a relatively short period of time and with an incredibly cool, yeah, friend in my wife, but also now a mother to three children, she was willing to up sticks, and we moved to Nairobi for another 6 years.
Mm.
I went to work for the Flying Doctors. So I flew for 5 years for a company called Amref. And yeah, I was flying doctors around in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and loved it. It was, and you ask, how does one get to do that? Um, Preparation. It sounds quite easy,
Mm.
but you do need to get the bits of paper and the licenses but what I learned actually is if you put yourself out there and if you show intent, and ask for help, that's a key word. Ask for help.
Mm.
It's amazing how many people line up on your side.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in that mix, Talia, there was this sort of, there's something missing. I felt like I was doing everything I wanted to do, but was I really tasting? It was like eating a meal, but not chewing properly, not really savoring.
Yeah, and I think earlier you said about you get shot at for saying that, but I think it's something that's so widely experienced, as I'm sure you see in the people that you work with, that even when you have all the things you ever thought you could possibly want, you still have that piece like missing within you. And that's why wisdom within, as we said, it's all about going within, because even when you have everything external to you, if you don't go on the journey back to you, then you're never gonna be able to taste the sweetness of what you're experiencing externally.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what got me into the world of coaching. So 2014, while I was still working as a pilot, I also trained as a coach with CTI, and I went to the courses, and I loved it. And in a way, there was an element of self-help about it. It was like, I don't really feel like there's anything wrong with me, but I do feel like I'm stuck in first gear.
Yeah.
And how do I learn to look within in order to live better without?
Hmm.
And that's what got me into coaching. And then along the road, at that point, I wasn't necessarily intending on becoming a coach. I was just trying to learn a bit more about being human.
And what
And
made you choose coaching as opposed to yoga or a different modality? What drew you into coaching?
I think I was so lazy that, actually, when it came to sort of even yoga, sort of fills me with a sense of, oh, I'd have to get up and bend, but I must admit, I love it when I do it. No, the mind. Do you know, it's we take our bodies to extremes in many cases. It could be whether you're into mountain bike riding, or if you're into Pilates, or if you're into marathons or triathlons, or just going to the gym. I mean, it's widely understood the benefits of looking after your body, this amazing vehicle that we've been given, this gift. And yet we don't take our minds to the gym. You know,
Yeah.
the central processing unit that drives the body, we tend to sort of take it for granted.
Mm.
And so I got curious about this idea of, well, hold on a minute, what about the mind? What about my mind, which, if I were to sort of put it to a side, I get the feeling sometimes it holds me back. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't, I'm not fully reaching my potential. Single day that we lead, things pop up that can irritate, can anger, can make our lived lives a much less positive, enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
And mental fitness is about learning to find the gift in pretty much every situation. Um, and that requires the going to the gym, going to the mental gym. Let me see if I finished answering your question. So we came back from Kenya, and now I spend part of my life, yeah, working with clients. I mainly work with men, and I can explain why if you'd like in a minute, but I tend to work with men. And the idea is very much around this idea of transformation and shift in perspective.
Hmm.
And I won't work with clients as a coach unless they actually go through the positive intelligence program, because that's the language. It's a language that I think we all need. And
Yeah.
positive intelligence, without sort of beating that drum too loudly, is a movement. It was set up by Shazad Shamin. He's a professor of He's a professor at Stanford University. He created the movement, and his mission, if you like, is to get positive intelligence into at least 1 billion of us, not a few thousand, but 1 billion,
Mm.
so that we can actually get involved with the idea of talking about how wonderful and magnificent and positive and gentle and kind and special we are.
Yeah, so there's different areas we can definitely go down now. I think maybe now just if we could go into a little bit more detail about positive intelligence in terms of how it's structured, just so people can get a feel for what it
Sure.
is.
Yeah, 100%. There's this I don't know if you're familiar with the image of sort of Sisyphus, the king who was doomed to push a boulder up a hill, up a mountain every single day, and that boulder would always fall down. You'd never quite reach that point. So I think in many ways, mental fitness is how do we break the cycle of just pushing that boulder up the hill?
Mm.
Um, Mental fitness, positive intelligence introduces us to, I guess, two sides. The dark side would be learning about our saboteurs. In fact, I got you to do the saboteur assessment, didn't I?
Yeah.
And that is really just an introduction to what are the coping mechanisms that we most likely, in fact, almost definitely created in childhood to cope with the world that we were born into. So what would they be? Look, if you're bright, you're most likely to become a hyperachiever. The idea is I will take the fact that I'm bright and do extremely well at school and get A's in everything, and mummy and daddy will love me.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm naturally empathetic, then I'm likely to have a pleaser saboteur. I will run around and make everybody else's life easier. I will anticipate their needs before they know them. I will be that ray of sunshine
Mm.
in everybody's lives. Um, it sounds exhausting even saying it, but a stickler. I'm just chucking out a few. There are 10 saboteurs.
Yeah.
And of the 10 saboteurs, the master saboteur, the puppet master, if you like, is the judge. The judge is something we all have. It's the saboteur that every single one of us has. And it's the voice that tells us we're not worthy. It's the voice that tells us we make a mess of things. It's unpleasant, and it's demeaning, and it's painful. The judge tends to be broken into three categories: the judge of self, the one I just described, the I'm not worthy; the judge of others, those people are total idiots, and I'm so much smarter than they are. Do you really make yourself feel better when you do that? Well, if you do, it's not real. Judge of circumstance. Here's a lie a lot of people tell themselves throughout a lifetime. I will be happy when,
Mm.
I'm a famous podcaster, or I'm a famous this or a famous that. 99% of the time you achieve whatever you think you're going to be happy at, and then you go straight on to the next thing and you forget to celebrate. It's just a wheel.
Yeah.
So the master saboteur is the judge, and then the judge has all these accomplice saboteurs, a couple of which I gave you before. And what's mental fitness? It's about learning these voices that are not really us. So look, when you're 8 or 9, it makes a lot of sense to have a coping mechanism. It's a little bit like, how do I give myself cover while I work out what this crazy world that all these adults are living in?
Mm.
I almost have an image of a shield over my head, and ironically, the saboteurs that we tend to develop tend to be, it actually makes sense if you think about it, they tend to be hijackings of our greatest gifts.
Mm.
So the typical comeback I hear is, hold on a minute, if I'm a hyperachiever, surely that's good. I'm driven to do well in my exams. I'm driven to do well in my work and my career. I'm driven to be the best at everything I do. No, absolutely not. That doesn't lead to happiness. It doesn't lead to mental well-being. Mm. And so what is positive intelligence? It's an introducing you to those voices, those limiting beliefs, those critical, stress-inducing, anger-reducing, anxiety-inducing habits that not only are harmful to yourself, but also tend to be harmful to others.
Mm.
Um, it's not that much fun living with someone who's trying to control you, or is a victim, constantly feeling sorry for themselves, or even someone running around fixing everything for you. Nobody really asks you to do that.
Yeah.
So that's one side. That's the dark side. That's the Vader world, if you like. And then what positive intelligence teaches you, what mental fitness is developing a different perspective. And we call that the sage perspective. So if you like, it's the Yoda, it's our inner wisdom. It's who we really are. It's if you were to take a picture of yourself when you were 4 or 5 year old, I mean, dig one up and have a look at it and look in the eyes of you as a child. This is before you were domesticated, before you developed your saboteurs. This is you, free, open, energized, optimistic. Anything is possible. No rules, no strictures, no thou must or thou shalt.
Mm.
And in many ways, mental fitness is a reintroduction to who am I? How resilient can I be? Um, and I think the sage perspective, what we talk about in the sage perspective, is one simple rule. And if you remember nothing else from this, remember this. It's the idea that absolutely everything is a gift. Anything that happens to you can be turned into a gift should one decide to look at it like that. Now, very often the judge will jump in and go, bad, bad, bad. That person I work with who I can't stand, who's constantly bad, you know, anxiety, stress, fear, insecurity. But all of those emotions are actually a choice, Talia.
Yep.
It's, and one of the things I learned, and I think I probably work on and be working on for the rest of my life, is this idea of when you're truly present, like I feel I am here with you now, um, it's actually impossible to feel stress or anxiety or fear or negativity,
Mm.
unless, of course, my Zoom screen vanishes. Um, but all of those emotions tend to exist other than in the present. They tend to exist in the future, what might happen or what's going to happen next, or in the past,
Yep.
regret. And of course, how much control do you reckon you have over the future?
We don't.
And how much ability do you have to go and change anything in the past?
No ability.
So why is it that we spend so much of our time either in the future imagining or in the past regretting?
Because people don't know how to be present.
So that's mental fitness, is is the understanding of when I am hijacked by saboteur of choice. And you can take the saboteur assessment test. You just go online, put in saboteur assessment test, answer the questions, you get a free assessment of who are these characters that are showing up most in my life and what are the impact they're having.
Mm.
And you just answer the question, how do I build the neural pathways from my limbic brain, my based brain? Remember, we're such a successful species partly because fear is a dominant emotion. When that leaf flutters in a bush, we tend to think tiger. We don't tend to think, ooh, what's in the bush? And so that flight mechanism that creates a wonderful opportunity for our saboteurs. I'm not telling everyone to become sort of, tiger agnostic. Yeah, you know, be fearful, but put it in the right perspective.
Mm.
And so building these neural pathways is what mental fitness is. And there's plenty of scientific evidence now, not my field of expertise, but there's plenty, if you want to go look it up, that you can actually change the shape of your brain. You can absolutely change the way you react to situations. from the fear orientated limbic brain to the more present, optimistic, compassionate, empathetic, goal orientated neofrontal cortex by learning to be present. And that's, of course, mindfulness, which, if I said meditation, causes most people to run at high speed in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But if you actually start to work, which I do and fail on a fairly regular basis, but just to try and learn to be present, do a 2-minute meditation, a 5-minute, a 10-minute, meditate when you're eating a meal, chew.
Yeah.
When you're sitting in the pub drinking, be present. Notice that first sip.
Yeah, everything's an opportunity to practice. This is what I tell people because they get so in a state of doubt that it's possible for them. But I'm like, no, you can just invite it into any part of your life, a conversation, a walk. And so, yeah, it just really begins with that. And yeah, so thanks so much for sharing about positive intelligence. And definitely go take the assessment if you're listening to this. And next, I want to speak about your focus on men and why you focus on men, what you feel like you learn by working with men about the problems men are facing currently and how we as a society can bring awareness to this.
I think as a coach, you tend to find your tribe. And in my case, my tribe is a combination of where I think there's need, but also where I have impact. Where have I noticed that I am most effective? There's also the reality of the world of coaching, Talia, where, more often than not, if I go to a conference or if I go to further training, there are a huge number of incredibly talented, able women coaches and not that many men. So there's just the reality of, I think this is a calling that tends to attract more women than men. And that's a separate topic. I think I'm fascinated by and come across, well, what am I fascinated by? I'm fascinated by men's ability to be incredibly compassionate, empathetic, supportive, understanding, gentle, and kind
Mm-hmm.
when put in a safe environment, when weapons are
Mm.
put away.
Yeah.
I find that magical, and I've run a few men's groups where the level of support, the level of kindness, the level of being there for each other is so at odds with what appears in the outside world, or the way in which men feel they have to behave or show up. So to sum up, there's a need. I think some men prefer to talk to a male coach, although by no means all. I think my tribe tends to be people who look at my lived experience and say, well, I'm of that age, of that background. I understand where you're coming from, and I can trust you, because a coaching relationship, if nothing else, is based on trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on confidentiality. It's based on being able to put down, like I said earlier, any weapons that might otherwise get in the way. And yeah, by all means, think of weapons as saboteurs.
Mm. Yeah.
What I'm fascinated about, and but at the very early stages, is mental fitness. And I use that word deliberately because I've noticed with younger men, in fact, the young in general, my daughter as well says, Barbara, if you use that word mental health, I switch off. There's so much debate, so much focus on us as a generation around mental health that just that word sends me running. But mental fitness, is a different conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, in a minute, I actually get to control. I get to actually celebrate, learn, work on, and have an element of control over my mind, that's interesting. And then men, young men, I do worry. And I think young women worry too, about what is the voice of a young man in today's world? What is it acceptable to say? What is it
Mm.
acceptable to have an opinion on? And we're brought up, at least I try and bring up my kids with the idea of failing is okay. Failing's good. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
FAIL. It stands for all I've learned.
Mm.
And if you, as a young man in today's world, are too frightened to open your mouth and get something wrong, and have your friends say, not sure about that, or really, or tell me more, then you end up with silence. And into that silence steps, frankly, more. And I suspect that becomes a breeding ground for anxiety and stress and low self-esteem and low self-worth. And I don't think young women want that. And I'm sure as hell sure young men don't either.
Yeah.
Not my tribe, but definitely an area of further debate.
Yeah. And how do you think, as women, as older men, as a collective, we can foster an environment for men to feel more able to step into their empathy, their softness, and the kindness you see when they remove their armor?
I don't know. I don't know. I think the very fact that it becomes a conversation is a really good start.
Yeah.
It's a bit like not so much asking for help, but if it's a topic of conversation and it's a known, then just young men creating the space or the time or having the conversation around what is acceptable or not, and talking to women about it. This is not just men on men. This should be a debate amongst that generation, between that generation, so that there's magic, there's communication, there's empathy, there's support, there's all of those good things. But unless it's a conversation, unless it's in the open, um, then it's only going to get worse.
Exactly, that's how I feel because I feel like there's so much tension because there's a lot of disappointment in men among women, and so there's almost this
Yeah.
so much anger, but then men can't really express how they're feeling in that because they're almost always blamed as like the villain almost.
So then I'd ask you the question, what is the gift in this situation? What is the gift in this awkward moment
Mm.
where we are with regard to the voice of young men in today's world? What's the gift in this difficult situation?
I think we're paving a way for a new relationship between men and women where, I think the way that men are treated today is a result of the shifting things that are happening for women. And so I think the next evolution of this is to understand, well, what does a healthy relationship between the two look like? Because the status and the opportunities for women had to rise in this way. And so
100%.
it's just a constant evolution. And during these evolutions, there has to be uncomfortability. And I think, as you say, the way through is through conversation. And so that's why I create conversation through my podcast. And I spoke to you about maybe hosting conversations between men and women because I think I work a lot with women. And as you say, I think there's such beautiful work done just with men, but it's like, how can we facilitate conversation between the two in a space that feels safe, in a space that feels nurturing, and in a space that facilitates transformation?
You're 100% right. Because, the idea that sort of men's groups should just be for men and we just talk about bloke stuff or how we're feeling. No, I think there may be a place where a voice can be developed, but that voice is no meaning if it just stays within an enclave.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. The needle needed to swing, and maybe all that's really happened is that the needle has swung, and it needs to return to some sort of equilibrium. But I have absolutely no doubt and take great pleasure in believing that women will be part of that process.
Yeah.
Uh, I was
And
talking to
I,
my
yeah.
17-year-old daughter saying, what is it about boys in my class? They don't have a voice that they, I know they have a voice, but I don't hear their voices. Where,
Mm.
we need that voice. We need their presence.
Yeah, and I think for also women need to understand that feminism and all these movements, it doesn't mean like let's get rid of men. It's just changing the dynamic. But we need both, like it's the
Yeah.
yin and the yang. And so it's understanding what a healthy relationship with a man and the masculine as a collective energy is.
So there you go. There's the gift, right?
Yeah.
Things needed to change, and change isn't comfortable, and things get broken, but they needed to.
Yeah, and I'd say to anyone listening, like it really starts with how are you relating to the men in your life, your dad, your brother, your partner, your relatives, your friends? Like, how can you create a conversation where you open more vulnerability and say, how are you really feeling about this? And being soft and gentle with the men around you, honoring all that they do, and being real about where they can change, but in a way that's not coming from a space of anger, but from a space of compassion and understanding
And curiosity.
and curiosity always. Yes.
Yeah. And humor, too. It can very quickly turn into a rather heavy sort of anxiety inducing. There should be humor, love, kindness, gentleness, curiosity, and then an action. That's key too. And that's one of the sage powers in positive intelligence. How do we how do we lead with empathy and understand someone's position? How do we brainstorm around what can be done better? And then how do we put it into action?
Yeah.
So, like you say, you run retreats. I want to start running a few retreats next year, and I'll definitely do a. I'm thinking now, just talking to you, it shouldn't just be a young men's retreat. It should be, a group. That's how movements start.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it works really well when you do things with men and women, you do some work separate, then bring them
Yeah,
together. Like I've done incredible things like that. And yeah, it's exciting.
yeah. Look at that smile. Yeah. So that's purpose, isn't it? It's about having a quest, and I think every one of us. It's not that one person can hold a flag at the front of an army. I think we can all hold a flag. Um,
Exactly.
and working out what's on our flag and what we stand for and what's important to us,
Yes.
and that flag being visible. Um, that's
Um,
important. And I
yeah.
think I think so. That's something I stand for and I believe in. Friendships. Um, we haven't really touched on that, but I do sometimes wonder. I mean, it would be a core value of mine, and I adore my friends, and as I get older, I reinvest in those relationships because you mustn't let them be like that sort of potted plant on a shelf that you don't water.
Mm,
They're the most special things we ever create on this planet.
mm. Well, yeah, I actually met Johnny because his one of his best friends is my best friend's dad. He's the godfather to one of my best friends. So yeah. And I also think what you said about everyone having their flag, something that I used to really struggle with was feeling like, you have to stand for every single cause and get involved in absolutely everything. And especially on social media, there's this like, if you don't speak up about this, then you're a bad person. But I think it's about really understanding like where is your service and how is your service taking place? Like maybe you are into politics, or maybe you are into working one-on-one, or maybe you are into going to volunteer, but whatever it is, just going all in on that and really like connecting with it and knowing that that is the thing that lights you up. Because when there's that light and that passion and that drive, that means that it is a key purpose for you. And there's nothing more beautiful than being in that purpose.
And the impact that people like you, when you're on point like that, unintentionally or intentionally gives permission for others to do the same.
Yeah.
And we should never underestimate that. Just showing up and yeah, hoisting our flag and leading. That's what leading is, I think, is not it's not necessarily leading a group or an army. It's taking responsibility for ourselves and becoming a leader
Mm,
of ourselves.
yeah.
Um,
100%.
you mentioned service. I think it's an enormous joy that we can all get involved in our own unique way,
Mm,
and service and kindness. Just the joy and the health benefits. I mean, let's get back to health. The health benefits I think we as individuals accrue or get when we are selfless. And that can be a little random act of kindness. They're around us every single day. Whether we choose to act on them or not is one thing, or just finding where we can be of service to another. But our days are actually filled with opportunities to connect with our kinder, gentler, service orientated self. And wouldn't the world be a better place for us, not just for others, but for us, if that became more part of our being present? I
100%.
don't think you can do that if you're not present, Talia.
Well, I was just about to say this. I think as a people pleaser in the past, as that one my main saboteur, it's like this idea of selflessness really needs to be understood because you can't be selfless if you don't fill up your own cup, and also compassion is seeing yourself and others, but you can't see yourself and others if you don't see yourself. And
Yeah.
so the journey begins with you and the immediate opportunities around you. I think so many people do charitable things for public show and are always doing things without actually treating their families and immediate people around them and people they interact with that integrity, with that kindness, and with that
Or
gentleness.
or themselves. I mean,
Exactly.
if you don't truly learn how to love yourself, herein lies a huge topic. But learning to really love yourself and appreciate yourself and be at
Mm,
peace with yourself, it's hard to genuinely and authentically love others.
exactly. Exactly. So obviously you work with a lot of people who are maybe stuck in jobs or in jobs that don't allow you to live a life in your purpose or living a life where you're present because you're constantly used to being in this busy overdrive. I mean, I'm thinking about a lot of people that I know in my society here in London. And so
Mm.
how do you advise people to step outside of that, because I think it's such a paradigm. And, there's so many business people I know who I can't even imagine being able to like step into deep presence because they're so in overdrive the whole time. So how do
Yeah.
you get people there? Obviously, the positive intelligence, but are there any other things you'd share now, say if someone was listening who feels like, oh, this is just not possible for me, or oh, I need to support my family, or oh, I have to like stay in this job.
The world of coaching and the world and the coaching I do, you do not have an agenda for your client,
Hmm.
um, because that would be mentoring. That would be, um, imposing a belief or how I've done something to somebody else.
Mm,
And coaching that sticks, coaching that works, genuine transformation comes from within. And that's not me avoiding your question. It simply is the people who really that I coach and choose to coach um, come to me with an idea of not just where they are, but where they want to get to,
mm,
with a desire to have a bigger impact on the world,
yeah.
impact on um, the important things, their relationships, their children, their friends, but also, yeah, their work. But I think it's a realization that, hold on a minute, I'm flat out, but I'm in first gear. And I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase festina lente.
No.
This idea, it's this idea of to make haste slowly,
Mm,
that actually you accomplish an awful lot more in your professional life, in your home life, in your personal life, if you just learn to slow down.
mm,
And by slowing down and unpacking, taking out those weights in your backpack that you inadvertently and unconsciously carry around with yourself, guess what? You go further. With
100%. This has been such a journey for me because I think where I grew up, obviously Cambridge, North London, it's like the pace and the speed and how busy you are is a measure of how successful you are. You know, people are always like, oh my God, I worked 12 hours today. And like, you know, it's really took me time to like let go of that and be like, actually less is more and doing things slow and with intention and presence will tenfold your actual the quality and also the amount of impact you can have because of just the where it's coming from.
Well, lucky you, and thank you for embodying the voice of the judge and the impact and the sensation and the feeling of judging yourself and feeling judged by others and having to perform and also, the sage perspective of this doesn't honor me, it doesn't help me, it doesn't help the world, it doesn't help those around me.
Yeah.
Actually, by slowing down, I'm not being irresponsible, I'm not undisvaluing the world in which I live in, I'm not becoming unproductive. If you're still listening to this podcast, it means that something is resonating within you.
Yeah.
Um, there's a drumbeat that we all need to find, but not just the drumbeat of the outside world that you should march this way to this speed in this direction, but what is my drumbeat?
Mm,
What is my rhythm?
yeah.
And then I'd say get curious about that. Get curious about, do I really love myself? Do I really appreciate myself? Am I worthy? How much time am I spending, trapped with my hand on the hob? The idea of it's all for, keeping your hand in a flame is not something any of us would ever do.
Mm,
And yet, why do so many people spend their
mm.
entire lives with their hands stuck on
Oh
that
my gosh.
and
Yeah.
realize that actually being that way and the impact it not only has on myself, but my wife or my partner or my friends or my colleagues, it's a choice. And you don't get to say, oh, it's not a choice. The answer is yes, it is a choice. And that's what I mean about taking responsibility for yourself. And it's only when we take responsibility for ourselves that things start to move.
Yeah, and also there's the piece of how much do you want to move out of that first gear? How much do you want to live a life that you feel good
Yeah.
about and good in? Because a lot of people don't take action, and even when I present them with options or they are presented with this podcast, they don't change. And like that's okay. Like I've learned to let go of that and not judge. But it's also like, yeah, it does take a journey and it does take facing yourself with honesty.
Well, I couldn't have asked you to have said that in a better way because that's why mental fitness is important because change is not easy. You can go on a diet and lose weight and then you put it back on again. You can go to read a self-help book and be great for a month and then forget about it. You can go to conferences and say, oh, I've got it, I understand it, and then forget it. Until you actually confront and learn about those saboteurs that you adopted, lived with, that in your mind supposedly got you through and made you who you are. Until you actually learn about them, you will never, ever, I don't believe, be free.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you're not free within, you create a life where you're not free without because you haven't freed yourself internally about what is possible for your life.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
but this is a choice.
Yeah.
And I think, sure, we live in a world, turn on your TV, turn on the news, listen to podcasts. There's this avalanche of bad stuff and difficult stuff and stressful stuff, cost of living, wars, famines, climate change. I mean, it is relentless. And yet, how about approaching that with choice? How about approaching that with what's the opportunity? What's the
Yeah. And I've always done that. And I think it's sometimes, I'm gonna say, hard to hold that light because I think people often think that I'm like crazy. But if the whole world did that, or if more people did that, I think the world would be a very different place.
Well, I think just think of it in terms of just one of us at a time. We can't, if we all go out and try and change the world, good luck. But
Yeah.
if we just take responsibility for ourselves and believe that we're worth it, that's
Yeah.
why you got to find a picture of yourself as a child and look into those eyes when everything was possible, where things weren't so heavy, when
Yeah, I was laughing because at my little altar where I do all my rituals, I have pictures of me
uh,
as a child. I like
yeah.
look at it every day.
Yeah, and that's how the world changes. That's how it becomes a better place. And
Yeah.
guess what? We actually get to control that stuff. We actually have control over being present and what we choose and who we choose and how we show up.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's not easy. Like we mentioned that, but like it doesn't just happen overnight that you can just be present. So I think be prepared that to take that. But again, it's like, are you worth it? Do you love yourself enough to see that you're worth it?
Look, it's not easy going to a gym. A lot of people go to gyms and give it up. Mental fitness, it's not easy, but boy, the results are great.
Yeah, your whole life shifts, your whole life changes.
Statistically, I think people who go through and this is not me plugging positive intelligence, there are other things you can do around our conversation. But, the success rates are in the 90% for people who actually do the program, stick to the program, especially if they do it in a group, a friendship group, a pod. And then we suddenly realize, oh my God, we're all the same.
Yeah.
You know, we
And
listen,
what
and yet,
exercises are built into the app? So obviously like there's the diagnostics, but what sort of exercises do they do to create that shift?
well, first of all, is learning about your saboteurs, which ones are mine. Then there's quite a, there's a period of time over a 3-week period where you learn about the judge, you learn about your individual saboteurs, you learn about the impact they have on others. There's mindful that every single day in the app, there's a daily focus.
Hmm.
And this is the beauty of technology. I'm slightly of the age group where I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to phones, and I've harassed my children to the point of distraction. But I love the fact that you can actually have this on your phone. I love the fact that it gives you a daily focus and 3 opportunities during the day to learn more about what that daily focus is. I love the fact that it adapts to you and the saboteurs that you have. It's not just one size fits all.
Mm,
And it only really does take 21 days to form a habit. It's true.
mm,
Um, but it teaches you that every single day the world we live in is a laboratory for practicing this. That guy at work who drives you absolutely bonkers, that boss. Well, he stops being a harasser and he becomes your Jedi master because or the little things that annoy us now become our teaching tools.
hmm.
Um, so
It's a game changer.
we just turn everything that would irritate us now into, oh, I'm so grateful for the 49 steps I have to walk up from the tube. Not just because that's physically making me fit, but I can do mindfulness exercises as I walk up the steps. I can be truly present.
Yeah,
And I'm physically building those neural pathways in my brain that allow me to live much less in a world of fear and more in a world of opportunity.
yeah, amazing.
You and I should do a retreat. I'll bring the boys, you bring the
Oh
girls.
my God, I just had that vision, like as you like right before you said that. I like saw that and then you just said it.
But that's connection, you know.
There's so much value in what we just spoke about here. It really is the key to changing your life. And I always ask guests at the end, because this podcast is called Wisdom Within, are there any last bits of wisdom that you want to share with anyone listening, even though you've already shared so much?
Love is the answer.
There's no words after you say that. So, yeah, Johnny is amazing. I will drop his website in the show notes and yeah, get in touch with him, especially if you're a man, because he mostly works with men.
Hey,
And
sign up for one of our retreats to be
and
announced.
sign up for one of our retreats to be announced. Thank you so much for being here.
Loved it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I loved this conversation with Johnny so much, so thank you so much for listening. And speaking of retreats, I have two coming up in 2025. One all women's in France and the other mixed gender in Iceland. So I will be dropping the links in the show notes, and please do check it out for more information. For those in London, I have two upcoming workshops, one November 2nd, one November 10th. And of course, I'm available for one-to-one sessions, and I really look forward to connecting with more of you. Have an amazing rest of your day.